Greetings, dear listeners. Hope you're all doing well. We're out here tonight to welcome the arrival of the full Sturgeon's moon. The full Sturgeon's moon. Sounds kind of fishy to me. And it's the second of 4 supermoons this year. The second of 4 supermoons in 2023. So it's the full super Sturgeon's moon, not the surgeon's moon. Hey, at least I didn't make any jokes like that. I can't help it. I'm just a natural cut-up. What can I say? But in addition to making bad jokes and welcoming the arrival of the full super Sturgeon's moon, we're out here tonight as well to collect some footage for my upcoming upload, the Graveyard Vigil. The Graveyard Vigil. So please stay tuned for that. And without further ado, I'm going to ask our lovely and talented cinematographer, Dr. Curious herself, to give us a panorama shot of tonight's full Sturgeon's supermoon. And stay tuned for the Graveyard Vigil. Till midnight. Cheers. Here, as promised, is the Graveyard Vigil. Every town in the world has its weirdo, its village creep. Some have several. In our town, it was a dude known as the Ghouly Man. In appearance, he looked a lot like Uncle Fester from the old Addams Family TV show. He was bald with dark bulging eyes, a round moon face, and dry white skin that made one think of fungus. It was coarse-grained and yellowish-gray. The Ghouly Man always dressed in a funereal black suit, complete with white shirt and black tie. He spoke with a pronounced guttural accent, but no one was really sure where he had come from, although some said Transylvania. He had been seen at all hours of the day and night, walking the streets, talking and gesturing to himself. But if people didn't know where he came from, they knew what he liked. Women. Ilona had worked as a waitress in a greasy spoon where the Ghouly Man took most of his meals. And he always ordered liver. You know that old creep, the Ghouly Man? Ilona said to Gord. He wanted me to marry him. Me. Marry someone like that. Ilona, you see, was very fond of her looks. Maybe he had money, Gord suggested. There isn't enough money in the whole wide world, Ilona snorted. Well, in any event, he's dead, Gord said. And you shouldn't speak ill of the dead. Are you sure he's dead? Ilona squealed. She was a saucy one. For you see, the Ghouly Man, the late Ghouly Man, had been buried that very afternoon. And no one had attended the funeral. They were at a party at Jackie's place, down by the lake, and a number of guys, and they were all guys, had overheard the previous conversation and started giving Ilona a hard time about her boyfriend or fiancé, which pissed Gord off, as he wanted to be her man. Still, it was another young woman, Antonia, who stuck the knife in and twisted it. twisted it. "Are you sure he's really dead?" Antonius said, innocent-like. "So they tell me," Ilona said with a shrug. "Why don't you make sure?" Antonius said with a cruel smile. "How can I do that?" Ilona wanted to know. "Why, go to the cemetery and make sure he really was buried." And so that's how it started. At first, everyone was going to troop over to the boneyard, which was about a 10-minute walk from the party. But eventually, as more and more opted to stay, drink, and smoke, it ended up just being Ilona and Gord, which suited Gord fine. It was a night with a full silvery moon, and the old graveyard was awash in serious moonlight. It was so bright, it wasn't hard for them to find the new grave. In fact, the cemetery staff had left behind one of their shovels and a tarp. A tarp? For covering up the grave, perhaps? As they reached the cemetery, Ilona had taken Gord's hand. Now, as they stood above the grave marker, he put his arm around her and held her tight, and she didn't object. The moon's brilliant rays made it easy to read the legend below. Hugo von Metzengerstein. Weirdly, the grave marker gave a date of birth, March 1923, March 15th, 1923, but not a date of death. Why, he was 100 years old, Gord said in amazement, as Ilona turned towards him, her face radiant in the moonlight, and they kissed. It might have been due to the intensity of the moonbeams, or the presence of warm young life in a place of death. But for whatever reason, off came the garments, and Ilona and Gord were soon making passionate love on the Ghouly man's grave. A short pause. After it was finished, both Ilona and Gord lay stunned, their pale, sweaty bodies glistening in the moonlight. Neither of them spoke, and they just lay there, naked, until a shared impulse, or the cold night air, made them both reach for their discarded clothes. Gord was thinking of that old joke. Did the earth move? When the earth did in fact move. Move! It began shaking so hard, Gord wondered if it was an earthquake. But did they even have earthquakes in these parts? "Gordon!" Ilona cried. "What's going on?" I don't know," Gord yelled. But look!" The shaking, churning soil atop the Ghouly man's grave appeared to be boiling. It was as if something was bubbling up from below, and he could see flashes of a disgusting green light. Something huge, green, and glowing was emerging from the grave. At first, the thing's glistening and corrugated body made Gord think of a snake, then of an insect, then of a gigantic slug, until he finally realized exactly what it was. A maggot. A humongous maggot that radiated a spectral greenish light. A maggot with a face and eyes, and Gord recognized those eyes. They were the dark, bulging eyes of the Ghouly man. "Gordon, help me!" Ilona wailed. She was still sprawled in front of the grave, only half-dressed, looking at Gord, reaching her hands out towards him. Reaching her hands out towards him as the maggot slithered out of the earth and engulfed her. Gord turned and ran, and as he did, he heard Ilona scream. Once. When Ilona disappeared, the police questioned Gord as being the last person known to have seen her. Gord told them a story about a fight ending with Ilona stalking off alone into the night. The police could see he was lying and arrested him. But how could he tell them what really happened? Gord made himself a nuisance in jail, screaming that something was coming to get him, screaming so long and loud they were forced to put him in an isolation cell. An isolation cell with a barred window. And in the morning, they found he was gone, vanished, and Gord has not been seen to this day. But while the cell may have been empty, they did find one thing: a pool of glistening slime which coated the floor, slime which gave off a disgusting smell and a slight greenish glow. The moral of the story? As we're all going to wind up in the cemetery someday, why visit early? If this is your first visit to my channel, please consider subscribing. My name is Warren, and I write and tell original ghost stories and original horror stories featuring such cryptids as the Night Floaters, werewolves, and the Black-Eyed Children. So again, please consider subscribing. Please help me to reach my goal of 2,500 subs. Till midnight. Cheers. Video used in today's upload, courtesy of Dr. Curious, while the music was The Eerie, the Dread, by that wonderful patron of the internet, Kevin MacLeod.